The squeal of the wheels on the tracks and the gentle jolt of the train car signaled the end of Liam's long journey. He stepped onto the platform at Penn Station, pulling his scratched suitcase, a mixture of intense excitement and vague anxiety churning in his chest. At 24, with a freshly minted finance degree from a prestigious university, Liam had just landed his dream internship at a top-tier investment bank on Wall Street. These 6 grueling months of training could open every door for his future. He hailed an Uber. Josh, his best friend from college, had helped him find this apartment. "You're going to love it, man. It's a high-end place," Josh had said proudly over the phone. "My connections there set it all up. You won't regret it." The car weaved through the vibrant streets of Manhattan, where the pace of life seemed to never stop. Liam stared out the window, overwhelmed by the opulence and pulsating energy of the city he had never experienced before. "The Onyx Building," the driver announced, stopping in front of a massive bronze and glass gate. Liam paid the fare and stood before an entrance that looked more like a 5-star hotel than a residential building. A doorman in a crisp, wrinkle-free uniform stepped out of his glass cabin. "Good morning, sir. Who are you looking for?" the man asked, with a professional smile. "I'm Liam Thompson. I'm here to check into apartment 25C. The doorman checked his register and nodded. "Welcome to the Onyx Building, Mr. Thompson. The elevator's at the end of the hall. 25th floor, last apartment on the right." Liam entered and was stunned by the lobby. Gleaming marble floors, sparkling crystal chandeliers, and discreetly placed security cameras in every corner. He went up to the 25th floor. Arriving at the door of apartment 25C, he took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened almost immediately, as if someone had been waiting right behind it. A woman with jet black hair and deep eyes smiled at him. "Liam," she exclaimed with a radiant smile, "we were waiting for you." "I'm Seraphina." Liam blinked in surprise. Hello. How did you know I was Liam?" "You're Josh's friend, right?" she replied, stepping aside to let him in. "He told us all about you. Come in, come in." Liam entered the apartment and was once again overwhelmed. The living room was spacious, flooded with natural light from large glass windows overlooking the city. "Elara," Seraphina called out. "Liam is here." Another woman appeared from a bedroom. She had golden blonde hair and a warm smile. "Hi, Liam," Elara said as she approached. "Hope you had a good trip. You like cold brew coffee with cardamom, right? There's a pitcher ready in the fridge." Liam froze. Cold brew coffee with a hint of cardamom was his exact favorite drink, a rather specific preference. How could this woman possibly know that? How did you know that?" he asked, a forced smile on his lips. Seraphina and Elara exchanged an amused look. "Josh told us everything about you," Seraphina answered with a giggle. "He stopped by last week to make sure everything was ready for you." Liam frowned. Josh had never told him he had been here. More importantly, they hadn't spoken for months before the call about the apartment. How could Josh know about his newest preference? "Ah, yes," he mumbled, deciding not to ask further. "Come on, let us show you your room," Elara said, picking up his suitcase. "You'll see it's perfect." They walked through the living room, and Elara opened a door to a spacious bedroom with a stunning view. "This is incredible," Liam exclaimed, truly impressed. "How much do I owe for living expenses besides the rent?" "Oh, don't worry about that now," Seraphina said, waving her hand. "You can work out the details with Elara later." Liam nodded, though this generosity surprised him. "All right, we'll let you get settled," Elara said. "If you need anything, don't hesitate, we're right here." The two women left the room, leaving Liam alone with his thoughts. He sat on the bed, observing the room. Everything was too perfect. He took out his phone and dialed Josh's number. "Hey, man," Josh answered after a few rings. "What's up, you made it?" "Yeah, I'm here. Thanks again for the apartment. It's incredible." "But hey, did you stop by the girls' place last week?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "No. Why?" "They said you came to get things ready for me, and they knew I liked cardamom cold brew." "Oh?" Josh seemed to hesitate. "Listen, I probably mentioned it to someone who knows them. You know how news travels fast. You were a star in college, everyone knows you. Liam wasn't convinced, but he didn't press further. All right, anyway, this place is amazing. Thanks again. No problem, man. Enjoy it. See you later. Josh hung up quickly, leaving Liam with a strange feeling. Something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He called his mother to let her know he had arrived safely. He opened his suitcase and put his clothes in the closet. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he said. Seraphina peeked her head in. We're about to make dinner. Do you want to join us? I'd love to, Liam replied. Can I help with anything? No, you sit down. You must be tired from your trip. Liam left his room and sat on the sofa in the living room. Seraphina and Elara moved in the kitchen with perfect synchronization, as if they had been cooking together for years. They spoke in whispers, and Liam couldn't hear what they were saying. Have you two known each other for a long time? He asked to start a conversation. Oh yes, Elara answered, without turning around. You could say we're like sisters. What do you do for a living? Import, export, Seraphina said while chopping vegetables. We travel a lot. That's why we rented this apartment to have a stable place. And you start at Goldman Sachs tomorrow, right? Elara asked. Liam was taken aback. He had never mentioned where he would be working. Yes. How did you… Josh told us, they answered in unison before bursting into laughter. Of course, Josh told you everything about me, Liam muttered, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. Dinner was delicious. Seraphina and Elara had prepared a saffron risotto with pan-seared scallops with a skill that amazed Liam. However, Liam couldn't shake the strange feeling that had been with him since he arrived. Their questions were too precise, their knowledge of his life too detailed. How do you know all that about me? He finally asked directly. Seraphina and Elara exchanged another one of those meaningful looks that were beginning to annoy him. Josh talked a lot about you, Seraphina said. He's very proud of his successful friend. And we also make it a habit to get to know our roommates well, Elara added. It's important to know who you're living with, don't you think? Liam nodded, but he wasn't satisfied with that answer. He finished his meal in silence, observing his two roommates. I think I'll go to bed, he said as he stood up. Tomorrow is my first day. Sleep well, Liam, they said at the same time. Sweet dreams. He went back to his room and locked the door. Sitting on his bed, he reflected on the evening's events. Maybe Josh had really talked about him to someone who knew these women. Maybe he was worrying for no reason. But as he was drifting off to sleep, he heard voices coming from the living room. Seraphina and Elara were talking, but he couldn't make out their words. He strained his ears, but the voices faded, replaced by the silence of the night. Liam closed his eyes, trying to dismiss his doubts. Everything was fine. He was just lucky, that's all. Unbelievably lucky to have found this place, these roommates, this opportunity. He couldn't let his paranoia ruin it. The first few days at Goldman Sachs were a whirlwind. Liam plunged into a world of numbers, complex charts, and thick client files. He quickly proved his worth, his intelligence and tireless work ethic impressing his superiors. He often had lunch at the company cafeteria with other interns, exchanging stories about their initial struggles and hopes of being hired full-time. His days were filled with ambition and intense focus, a stark contrast to the creeping sense of unease that settled in whenever he returned to apartment 25C. One afternoon, as he was finishing his salad, Chloe, a cheerful colleague from the marketing department, sat down at his table. Hey, Liam, how are you settling in? She asked with a friendly smile. Pretty well, I'm learning fast, he replied, smiling back. By the way, I heard you're living in the Onyx building, the one near the old mall. Is that right? Liam nodded, a little surprised. Yes. How did you know? Oh, rumors spread fast in these hallways, she said, shrugging. I hear it's a beautiful residence. She paused for a moment, her gaze distant. But people say strange things happen there at night. Liam stared at her. Strange? What do you mean? I don't really know, Chloe admitted, lowering her voice. Stories of strange noises of people who suddenly disappear without a word. She offered a reassuring smile. Don't worry. It's probably just urban legends. Liam laughed. Yeah, probably. I haven't noticed anything special. He didn't believe it. Stories of disappearances in one of Manhattan's most luxurious residences. It was ridiculous. However, when he returned that evening, a sense of unease washed over him. The apartment was always spotlessly clean, eerily quiet. Seraphina and Elara were often out and returned very late. He rarely saw them, but details that had initially seemed insignificant began to add up. The Wi-Fi always cut out at exactly midnight. Every night at the same time, the connection would drop, leaving him in digital silence. At first he thought it was a technical issue, but it repeated with a disturbing regularity. He tried rebooting the router, checking the connections. Nothing worked. At the stroke of midnight, it was complete isolation. And then there were his personal belongings. Small things, but they unsettled him. Once his grandfather's vintage watch, a priceless memento, disappeared from his bedside table. He searched for it for hours, rummaging through every corner of his room. Finally, he found it placed on the coffee table in the living room next to a glass of wine. Elara was sitting on the sofa reading a book, a faint smile on her lips. Maybe you left it here, she said, without looking up from her book. You were in such a hurry this morning. Liam looked at her, incredulous. He was sure he hadn't put the watch there, and he hadn't been in a hurry that morning. He had been as calm as ever. No, I don't think so, he stammered. I left it in my room. Elara shrugged. It's just fatigue, Liam. You're working too hard. He said nothing, but a shiver ran down his spine. He started locking his bedroom door. Every night before going to bed, he made sure the key was turned properly in the lock. A simple act, but it gave him a fragile sense of security. One evening he had to work late at the bank. The files were piling up, and he wanted to make a good impression. He came home at 10 p.m., exhausted. As he entered the apartment, he heard a strange sound, a low melodic humming accompanied by a soft clicking like wind chimes. The sound seemed to be coming from Seraphina's room, but it was difficult to pinpoint the exact source. He tiptoed down the hallway. The closer he got to Seraphina's room, the clearer the humming became, the more resonant the clicking. But just as he was a few steps from the door, everything suddenly stopped. Silence fell. He stood there motionless for several long minutes, listening to the void. Nothing. He went back to his room, his mind in turmoil. He was sure he had heard something. The following weeks passed, and Liam grew visibly thinner. The dark circles under his eyes deepened. He couldn't sleep for more than 3 hours a night. Every night he would wake with a start, convinced he had heard noises, footsteps in the hallway. At the bank, his concentration faltered. He messed up an important file, mixing up numbers and client names. His superior, Mrs. Davis, summoned him to her office. "Liam, are you all right?" she asked, her sharp gaze seeming to see right through him. "You seem a bit distracted lately. You're making unusual mistakes." I'm just a little tired, Mrs. Davis," he replied, his throat tight. "I've been working a lot." "I understand," she said, seemingly unconvinced. "But you need to rest. We need you at 100%. He nodded, ashamed. His mind was elsewhere. One morning, as he was leaving the building, he ran into the doorman. The man, usually cheerful and professional, looked very serious today. He approached, lowering his voice. "Sir," the man said, his eyes darting around as if afraid of being overheard, "I advise you to move out. Up there, things are not right. The people who live in 25C always leave without a word." Liam opened his mouth to ask for more to understand, but the doorman, after a final worried glance, hurried back to his cabin, leaving him alone with his unanswered questions. He took out his phone and sent a text to Josh. "Josh, we need to talk. Urgent." No reply. Liam waited an hour, then 2, still nothing. He tried calling, no answer. He called again, still nothing. Finally, a voicemail came through. Josh's voice almost panicked. "Get out of there now, Liam. Don't ask questions. Go while you still can." The voicemail ended. Liam called back several times, but the number was no longer reachable. Liam was completely alone, trapped. He had just arrived in this city. He had no one to turn to except Josh, who had now mysteriously disappeared. He had several months left in his internship. The Onyx building, a haven of luxury and tranquility, had become his prison. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew one thing: he was in danger, and no one was coming to help him. The next few days were a living hell for Liam. Sleep had become an unattainable luxury. He lived in a state of constant nervous tension, startled by the slightest noise. His health deteriorated visibly. He lost weight rapidly. His cheeks became hollow. His eyes were always red and sunken. He moved through the luxurious apartment like a ghost, a prisoner of his own fear. At Goldman Sachs, the situation was even worse. Mrs. Davis summoned him to her office again. This time, her tone held no sympathy. "Liam, I'm sorry, but I can't let you continue like this," she said, her tone firm. "You're exhausted. You're making serious mistakes that could cost the company millions. I'm forced to put you on leave." "Leave?" Liam stammered, the shock bringing him a little more clarity. "Yes," Mrs. Davis confirmed. "You need time to sort out your personal problems. When you feel ready, get back in touch. But for now, you can't continue working." Liam didn't argue. He was too tired to defend himself. He nodded, perhaps knowing deep down that a little rest would do him good. But rest did not come. Now he was trapped in the apartment 24/7 with no work to escape to. He was completely alone with his fears, facing two women who always looked at him as if they knew a terrible secret he was unaware of. One afternoon, as he was trying to read a book in the living room to keep his mind busy, Seraphina approached. "You look so tired, Liam," she said in a sickeningly sweet voice. "You should relax. We have something for you." She held out a porcelain cup containing a dark brown liquid steaming slightly. "What is this?" Liam asked, wary. "An herbal tea," Elara replied, having appeared silently behind Seraphina like a shadow. "To help you sleep better. We've noticed you don't seem to be adjusting to the big city life. You're losing weight. It's noticeable." The scent from the cup hit his nostrils, both sweet and slightly acrid, unfamiliar. "No, thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't like herbal tea." Seraphina and Elara exchanged a look. Their smiles widened, revealing something sinister devoid of any warmth. "As you wish," Seraphina said. "But you should take care of yourself, Liam. You look so fragile." That night, Liam locked his bedroom door more carefully than ever. He even propped a chair under the doorknob just in case. He lay awake, listening to the oppressive silence of the apartment. He knew they were out there watching him, waiting. Around 2 a.m., he heard whispers just outside his door. Low, steady voices, the words indistinguishable, but their tone made his blood run cold. Then he heard the doorknob slowly turn. Slowly. Creaking. The chair he had propped up blocked it. The noise stopped. After a seemingly endless silence, he heard soft footsteps moving away. That was the last straw. He couldn't stay here a second longer. He had to escape. The next morning, he decided to leave. Waiting until he was sure Seraphina and Elara had left for their daily work, he sprang into action. With his heart pounding in his chest, he frantically threw his clothes and personal belongings into his suitcase. He didn't care about being neat. He just wanted out. He grabbed his grandfather's watch, his passport, and his wallet. He was ready to leave everything else behind. He opened his bedroom door, suitcase in hand, ready to face anything. But the apartment was strangely empty and silent. The morning sun streamed through the large windows, creating a false sense of peace. Liam didn't waste a second. He rushed to the front door, his trembling hands fumbling with the lock, and burst out into the hallway. He was free. He was going to get out of here. He pressed the elevator button, every second of waiting in agony. Finally, the metal doors opened. He stepped inside, desperately pressing the ground floor button. As the elevator descended, he could feel his chest about to explode. Reaching the ground floor, he bolted out of the elevator, running through the magnificent marble lobby that now looked like the entrance to a tomb. The doorman was not at his post. The large gates were open. Liam burst out of the building, breathing in the fresh air of freedom. He walked away without looking back as fast as he could, as far away from this cursed place as possible. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he had to get as far away from the Onyx building as possible. He walked for hours, his feet automatically carrying him through the crowded streets of Manhattan. He didn't see the two figures standing at the window of the 25th floor apartment, watching him walk away with a satisfied smile on their lips. Seraphina and Elara. They had never really left. What Liam didn't know was that the two women were practitioners of an ancient ritual using human life force to maintain their wealth and youthful appearance. This was not their first time. They sought out potential tenants, young, talented, ambitious, and most importantly, alone in the city, and then ensnared them for their dark purposes. Eventually, Liam found a cheap motel in Brooklyn. Feeling a little safer, he believed he had escaped the cursed house, unaware that he had been marked by the two women weeks ago. That same night, as he was fast asleep, exhausted from his escape, the two women appeared in his room. They didn't come through the door. They simply materialized from the shadows, dressed in pristine white gowns, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Elara gently passed her hand over Liam's forehead. Not understanding what was happening, Liam woke with a jolt. The room was empty, but an overwhelming terror gripped him. He screamed and ran out into the street, running aimlessly with no destination. The world continued to turn indifferent to his fate. But somewhere a mother began to worry. In a quiet little town, hundreds of miles from the chaos of New York, Sarah Thompson started to feel uneasy. Her son Liam, who always called or texted her every day, had been silent for 3 days. At first she told herself he was busy with his new internship. Wall Street was no place for slackers. But when the 4th day passed with no news, a mother's instinct began to scream. She called Liam. The call went straight to voicemail. She texted, "No read receipt." A cold feeling crept into Sarah's heart. She tried calling again several times throughout the day, but the result was the same. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, she decided she had to act. Sarah packed a small bag, booked the earliest bus ticket to New York, and left a note for her neighbor to look after the house. The journey was long and agonizing, each mile increasing her anxiety. When the bus arrived at the Port Authority bus terminal, she immediately took a taxi to the address Liam had proudly sent her, the Onyx building. When she arrived, the grandeur of the building overwhelmed her, but she was in no mood to admire it. She entered the lobby and went to the front desk. The doorman, the same one who had spoken to Liam, looked at her with a professional expression. "How can I help you?" "I'm here to find my son Liam Thompson. He lives in apartment 25C. The doorman checked the register. "Ma'am, Mr. Thompson checked out a few days ago." "Checked out?" Sarah was stunned. "That's impossible. He didn't say anything to me." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but that's the information we have. He left with his luggage." The doorman seemed a bit uncomfortable. A wave of panic began to rise in Sarah. Can I go up and talk to his roommates? Maybe they know where he went." After a moment's hesitation, the doorman nodded and allowed her to go up. She went up to the 25th floor, her heart pounding in her chest. Arriving at the door of apartment 25C, she took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened. Seraphina and Elara appeared smiling. They looked at her with curiosity. "Hello, who are you looking for?" Seraphina asked, her voice sweet. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. They were here. Liam must be around somewhere. "Hello, I'm Liam's mother. Liam Thompson. He lives here, but I can't get in touch with him." She stepped into the apartment. The two women exchanged a look, a fleeting gleam that Sarah couldn't identify before their faces returned to a neutral expression. "Liam?" Elara said, feigning surprise. "Oh no, ma'am. He's not here anymore. He moved out." Sarah's world collapsed. But that's impossible. He told me he lived here, apartment 25C. His friend Josh found him this place." "We don't have a male roommate," Seraphina replied with a cold smile. "It's just the two of us sisters living here." Sarah felt the panic rising. She looked around, searching for a sign, any proof of her son's presence. Her eyes fell on the coffee table in the living room, and there, placed casually, she saw Liam's watch, the vintage watch that her late father had given him on his 20th birthday. She reached a trembling hand towards the object, but Elara, with a fluid movement, picked it up first. "This?" Sarah uttered. Her voice choked with emotion. "That's my son's watch." "Oh, this," Elara said with a smile. "It's not ours. He must have forgotten it when he left. You can have it." Sarah ignored her reply. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for other clues. She saw a book on investment strategy that she knew belonged to Liam on the bookshelf, the spine slightly worn. "Liam is here," she screamed, her voice echoing in the apartment. "What have you done with him?" Seraphina and Elara took a step back, their smiles vanishing, replaced by an icy expression. "Ma'am, your son has moved out," Seraphina said, her voice losing its sweetness. "You can go check the building's security cameras. And now we must ask you to leave." She pushed Sarah out and slammed the door. Sarah, in her despair, let out a cry of rage and pain. "My son!" she screamed in the hallway. "They have my son!" Alerted by the screams, the doorman ran over. "What's going on, ma'am?" he asked out of breath. "I want to see my son, and those women refuse to let me in," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. "I saw your son leave the building with his suitcase, ma'am. He doesn't live here anymore," the doorman replied, his face showing his discomfort. "How is that possible? My son would never move out without telling me," Sarah protested, unable to believe it. "And I assure you that's what I saw on the surveillance video," he insisted, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Just then, Sarah's phone rang. An unknown number. She answered with a trembling hand. "Mrs. Thompson," a strange voice said on the other end of the line. "I'm calling from Wyckoff Heights Hospital in Brooklyn. A young man was admitted a few days ago in a state of psychosis. We found your number as the last one called in his contacts. His name is Liam." Sarah felt her legs give way. The phone fell from her hand. Tears streamed down her face. "They've hurt my son. They've killed my son," she sobbed, before running off, heading towards the hospital, her cries echoing in the luxurious but cold lobby. Sarah arrived at Wyckoff Heights Hospital in a state of turmoil, her breath short and her heart constricted. At the reception desk, after stammering an explanation, a sympathetic nurse led her to a quieter area, to a small, isolated room at the end of a hallway. Liam was there, or rather what was left of her son. He was curled up on the bed, so thin he was just skin and bones, his wide, lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling. He didn't recognize her. He mumbled nonsense about numbers, white shadows, and whispers in the dark. "Liam, my son," Sarah whispered, approaching. Her heart broke into a million pieces at the sight of her child's condition. She didn't know exactly what had happened, but she knew some terrible force had destroyed her son, body and soul. She sat by his bed all night, holding his thin hand, singing the lullabies he loved as a child. But there was no reaction. He was lost in a world she couldn't reach. At dawn, as she was dozing off from exhaustion, she felt a cold draft envelop the room. The cold was not from the temperature, but the presence of a pure evil. She opened her eyes. Seraphina and Elara were standing at the foot of the bed. But they didn't look like they had at the Onyx building. They wore long, flowing white gowns that seemed to emit a faint glow in the weak morning light. Their eyes shone with an otherworldly light, powerful and ancient. "This is not your place, ma'am," Seraphina said, her voice echoing strangely in the room, both sweet and menacing. "He belongs to us," Elara added, placing a long, pale hand on Liam's forehead. Sarah screamed and lunged forward, trying to protect her son. But an invisible force as strong as a steel wall threw her back, slamming her against the wall. She lost consciousness. When Sarah woke up, the two women were gone. But her son's condition had worsened. He began to convulse, his disjointed mumbles turning into terrifying screams. Doctors and nurses rushed in, but they could do nothing. Liam's body was failing, but his mind had been gone for a long time. A heart-wrenching scream escaped Sarah's throat. She cried until she had no more tears to cry. Her son, her pride and joy, had been stolen from her in the cruelest way. And at the Onyx building, the door to apartment 25C opened once again, ready to welcome a new tenant. A young ambitious law student from California, who had just landed a dream job at a prestigious law firm, had been recommended an amazing apartment with an unbelievable rent by an old friend. The cycle was beginning again. This story is a bitter reminder. Do not blindly trust appearances or recommendations, even if they come from people you trust. Listen to your instincts when something seems wrong, because it is better to be safe than sorry. Behind gilded doors and radiant smiles, darkness may be waiting, ready to devour the unsuspecting.